Do not leave them behind. They are small, scared, and alone. If nobody else will care for them, then I will." Those were the words of Amelia Carter, a young Omega who had spent most of her life hearing that she was unwanted. She never expected that one simple choice in a frozen forest would one day change the fate of an entire kingdom. Deep within the northern lands of Silvermoon territory, Amelia walked alone beneath tall pine trees covered in fresh snow. The winter air was cold, and every breath appeared like a small cloud in front of her. She was used to walking these paths by herself. Being alone had become normal. Ever since she was young, Amelia had been treated differently by her pack. They saw her as someone without importance, someone who could never bring honor or advantage to their community. They called her a weak Omega. They believed her gentle nature was a weakness. But Amelia never believed kindness was something to be ashamed of. Even when others ignored her, she still helped elderly villagers carry supplies. Even when others turned away from her, she still shared what little she had. She knew what it felt like to be forgotten, and she never wanted another living creature to feel that same loneliness. That was why she stopped when she heard a faint sound near the edge of the forest. Hidden beneath the branches of an old pine tree were 3 small wolf pups. They were unlike any animals Amelia had ever seen. Their fur carried a rare silver-gray color, and their eyes watched her carefully with a mixture of fear and hope. Amelia looked around, searching for signs of their family, but the forest remained silent. She knew the safest choice would be to continue walking. She knew many people would tell her not to get involved. But when she looked at the 3 helpless pups, she remembered every moment when she wished someone had chosen to help her. Slowly, she removed her warm cloak and placed it around them. "You do not have to be afraid," she whispered. "I know what it feels like when the world forgets you." Amelia carefully carried the pups to a small shelter near her cottage at the edge of the woods. She used her limited supplies to make them comfortable and searched for herbs that could help them recover their strength. She did not think about rewards. She did not wonder if helping them would change her life. She only saw 3 lives that needed compassion. Far away from Silvermoon territory, inside the grand halls of Frostvale Kingdom, Alpha King Ethan Blackwood received news that changed the entire royal court. For months, the kingdom had searched for 3 missing members of the royal family. The lost heirs had disappeared during a journey beyond the northern borders, leaving the kingdom filled with uncertainty. Ethan had searched every village, every path, and every corner of his territory, refusing to accept that hope was gone. Yet a new report had arrived. Strange signs had been discovered near Silvermoon territory. Signs that suggested the missing heirs might still be alive. The Alpha King immediately prepared to travel north. He did not know who had found them. He did not know where they were. And he certainly did not know that the person protecting his lost family was the very Omega his world had already decided was worthless. Meanwhile, inside her small cottage, Amelia sat beside the 3 sleeping pups and smiled softly. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel completely alone. She believed she was simply helping 3 creatures in need. She had no idea that her kindness had already reached the heart of the kingdom. And soon, the Alpha King would discover the truth that everyone else had failed to see. The most valuable person in his world was the one everyone had chosen to ignore. The small cottage at the edge of Silvermoon territory had never felt so peaceful to Amelia Carter. For the first time in years, she woke up each morning knowing that someone was waiting for her. The 3 wolf pups followed her quietly around the cottage, their small paws moving across the wooden floor as they watched everything she did with endless curiosity. Amelia found herself smiling more than she had in a long time. She knew they were not ordinary animals, but she did not know why. There was something unusual about them. They seemed to understand her words, almost as if they were listening to every sentence. Yet Amelia never questioned it. She simply accepted them as they were. To her, they were 3 lives that needed care. Far away from the cottage, Alpha King Ethan Blackwood traveled through the northern lands towards Silvermoon territory. His royal guards searched the surrounding forests, but Ethan remained focused on one thing only: finding his lost sons. For months, the kingdom had lived with uncertainty. The disappearance of the three young heirs had left a quiet sadness over Frostvale Kingdom. Ethan had continued searching, not because he was a king protecting his legacy, but because he was a father who refused to give up hope. During the journey, one of his advisors approached him with new information. "Your Majesty, the signs near Silvermoon are becoming stronger. Someone may have found them before we arrived." Ethan looked toward the snowy mountains ahead. "Then we must find that person." The advisor hesitated. "There is something unusual about the reports. Witnesses mention an Omega living near the forest." Ethan looked back with curiosity. "An Omega?" "Yes. They say she has been caring for 3 wolf pups without knowing their origin." The Alpha King became silent. He had met many people who claimed loyalty to the royal family. Many wanted recognition, influence, or rewards. But someone who protected 3 unknown pups without knowing their identity was different. Meanwhile, Amelia prepared a small meal inside her cottage. The 3 pups sat nearby, watching her carefully. "You 3 are getting stronger every day," she said with a gentle smile. "Soon you will be ready to explore outside again." One of the pups stepped closer, resting beside her feet. Amelia laughed softly. "You really do not want to leave, do you?" She had no idea that this simple moment would soon be witnessed by the most powerful person in the kingdom. As evening arrived, a group of travelers reached the edge of the forest. Amelia noticed unfamiliar footsteps outside her cottage and carefully stepped toward the door. She expected villagers or travelers passing through. She never expected to see the Alpha King himself standing there. Ethan Blackwood looked at the small cottage, then at Amelia. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He had imagined many possibilities during his search. He had imagined finding clues, discovering secrets, and facing difficult answers. But he never imagined finding a young Omega who looked at him without fear or expectation. Amelia lowered her head respectfully. "May I help you?" Ethan studied her expression. There was no excitement over meeting a king. No attempt to gain favor. Only genuine kindness. Then his attention shifted toward the 3 wolf pups behind her. The moment he saw them, something inside him changed. The royal symbol hidden beneath their fur confirmed what his heart already suspected. They were alive. His lost heirs were alive. Ethan took a quiet breath, overwhelmed by a feeling he had not allowed himself to feel for many months. Hope. But as he looked at Amelia, another realization slowly appeared. The person who had saved his family was not someone powerful. She was not someone seeking attention. She was simply someone who chose kindness when nobody was watching. And for the first time in a long while, the Alpha King wondered if fate had not only led him back to his sons, but also toward the one person who could change the future of his kingdom. Amelia Carter stood quietly near the doorway of her small cottage, still trying to understand the unexpected visitor standing before her. She had heard stories about Alpha King Ethan Blackwood all her life. Stories about his power, his leadership, and the responsibility he carried as the ruler of Frostvale Kingdom. But the man in front of her did not look like a distant ruler. He looked like someone who had spent many months searching for something precious and had finally found hope again. Behind Amelia, the 3 wolf pups watched Ethan carefully. They seemed to recognize him, moving closer with a comfort they had never shown toward anyone else. Amelia noticed the change in them and looked between the pups and the Alpha King with curiosity. "You know them," she whispered. Ethan looked at the 3 young wolves, his expression filled with emotions he struggled to describe. "Yes," he answered softly. "I have been searching for them for a very long time." Amelia did not understand the full meaning of his words yet. She only knew that the stranger who had arrived at her home was connected to the 3 lives she had chosen to protect. Ethan stepped closer but stopped at a respectful distance. He noticed the simple details of Amelia's cottage. The carefully prepared blankets. The small bowls of food. The herbs placed neatly near the window. Every detail showed the same thing. She had cared for his sons without expecting anything in return. "How did you find them?" Ethan asked. Amelia looked at the pups and smiled gently. I found them in the forest. They were alone, and they needed help. She paused before adding, anyone would have done the same. Ethan looked at her in silence. He knew that was not true. Many people would have walked away. Many would have ignored 3 unknown pups in need. But Amelia had chosen compassion without knowing their importance. Before Ethan could say more, several members of his royal group arrived outside the cottage. The moment they saw the 3 wolf pups, their expressions changed. The news spread quickly. The lost heirs of Frostvale had been found. But what surprised everyone even more was the person who had protected them. An Omega from Silvermoon territory. A woman many people had overlooked for years. When Amelia heard whispers from the visitors, she immediately stepped back. She looked uncomfortable with the attention. I did not know who they were, she said. Ethan turned toward her. That is exactly why your actions matter. Amelia looked at him, confused. What do you mean? Ethan answered calmly. If you had known their identity, people might have questioned your reasons. But you helped them before you knew anything about their name, their family, or their future. His words stayed with her. For most of her life, Amelia had been judged by what others assumed about her. People believed they understood her without ever taking the time to know her. Yet this Alpha King was seeing something different. He was seeing the choice she made when nobody was watching. That evening, Ethan invited Amelia to travel with them back to Frostvale Kingdom so the royal healers could examine the pups and the kingdom could officially welcome the heirs home. Amelia hesitated. The idea of entering a royal palace felt impossible. She had spent so long believing she did not belong anywhere important. I am not someone who belongs in a place like that, she admitted quietly. Ethan looked at her with understanding. Amelia, you protected the future of my kingdom before anyone knew your name. A person like that does not need permission to belong. For the first time in years, Amelia felt a small spark of hope. She looked at the 3 pups beside her and then toward the path leading beyond the forest. She had entered the woods as someone the world ignored. Now she was leaving with a secret she never expected to carry. And neither she nor the Alpha King understood yet that this journey would change much more than the fate of 3 lost princes. The journey from Silvermoon territory to Frostvale Kingdom took several days, but Amelia Carter barely noticed the passing time. Her attention remained on the 3 wolf pups traveling beside her. They were no longer the fragile creatures she had found beneath the old pine tree. With each passing day, they became more energetic, exploring their surroundings and staying close to her whenever they sensed something unfamiliar. Amelia smiled whenever they followed her footsteps. She still found it difficult to believe that these 3 little wolves were connected to the most powerful family in the kingdom. As they approached Frostvale Palace, Amelia felt a familiar feeling return. The same feeling she had carried for years. The feeling of not belonging. The enormous stone walls, the royal banners, and the countless guards reminded her that this was a world completely different from her own. She was just an Omega from a small village. She had no noble family, no influence, and no reason to stand among people who lived their entire lives surrounded by royalty. Ethan Blackwood noticed her hesitation as they entered the palace courtyard. You are quiet, he said gently. Amelia looked toward the grand halls ahead. I am trying to understand how someone like me ended up here. Ethan studied her expression. Someone like you? Amelia lowered her eyes. Someone who was never considered important. For a moment, Ethan said nothing. He understood those words more than she realized. As a king, many people respected his title, but few ever saw the person beneath it. Amelia, he finally said, the palace has many rooms filled with people who have important names. But very few have hearts like yours. She looked at him, surprised by his answer. Before she could respond, the palace doors opened, and the royal family advisors welcomed the 3 lost heirs home. The entire kingdom soon learned the truth. The missing princes had survived because an unknown Omega had found them and cared for them when no one else was there. The news spread quickly throughout Frostvale. Some people celebrated Amelia. Others questioned her. They wondered why the Alpha King trusted someone with no royal background. Amelia noticed the whispers but tried not to let them affect her. She had spent years hearing people judge her without knowing her. She knew she could not control every opinion. She could only control her actions. During the following days, Amelia stayed near the young princes while the royal healers monitored their recovery. She never acted as if she deserved praise. She simply continued doing what she had always done. She offered kindness, patience, and care. Ethan watched her from a distance and noticed something that surprised him. The royal court was filled with people who wanted to impress him. Amelia was the only person who never tried to gain anything from him. One evening, Ethan found her sitting in the palace garden with the three princes resting nearby. The sunset painted the sky with warm colors, and for a moment, the palace felt peaceful. "You know," Ethan said, "many people would ask for a reward after what you have done." Amelia looked at him and smiled softly. "I did not save them because I wanted something." Ethan nodded. "I know." Her answer confirmed what he had already begun to understand. Amelia's kindness existed before she knew his name. Before she knew their importance. Before she knew anyone would ever notice. That was what made it meaningful. But while the kingdom slowly began to recognize Amelia's worth, not everyone was ready to accept the change. Some members of the royal court believed an Omega from Silvermoon did not belong near the royal family. And soon, Amelia would discover that being recognized by the Alpha King was only the beginning of her greatest challenge. The whispers inside Frostvale Palace grew louder with each passing day. Although many citizens celebrated the return of the three lost princes, not everyone was willing to accept the person who had brought them home. Amelia Carter noticed the change around her. The warm smiles she received from some people were often followed by quiet conversations when she walked away. She knew those voices. She had heard them before in Silvermoon territory. They were the same doubts, the same judgments, and the same assumptions that had followed her for years. The difference was that this time, she was standing inside a royal palace beside the Alpha King. Some members of the royal council believed Amelia's presence created uncertainty. They believed an Omega with no noble background should not have influence near the royal family. During a formal meeting, one advisor carefully expressed those concerns to Ethan Blackwood. "Your Majesty, we are grateful for what she has done. However, the traditions of Frostvale have always been built around certain expectations." Ethan listened quietly. He understood the hidden meaning behind those words. They were not questioning Amelia's actions. They were questioning whether someone like her deserved recognition. Before Ethan could answer, Amelia spoke calmly. "I understand their concerns." Everyone looked toward her. She stood with confidence, even though she felt the weight of every person watching. "I know I do not come from a powerful family. I know I do not have a history inside this palace. But I hope people judge me by the choices I make, not by the things I was born without." The room became silent. Ethan watched her carefully. He had seen powerful people defend themselves with pride. He had seen leaders demand respect. But Amelia did something different. She simply spoke the truth. After the meeting, Ethan found her walking through the palace gardens. The three young princes followed nearby, happily exploring the paths they had only recently discovered. "You did not have to defend yourself alone," Ethan said. Amelia looked at the flowers beside the walkway. "I know. But I also know this is something I have to do for myself." Ethan understood. For so long, others had spoken for her. They had decided who she was without giving her the chance to explain. Now she was finally choosing her own voice. "You are stronger than you realize," Ethan said. Amelia smiled gently. "I am not sure about that. I just know what it feels like to be ignored. I do not want anyone else to feel that way." Her answer stayed with him long after their conversation ended. Later that evening, Ethan visited the royal archives to learn more about the history of his kingdom. He discovered something unexpected. Many generations before him, some of Frostvale's greatest leaders had come from unexpected backgrounds. The kingdom had always grown when people looked beyond titles and traditions. Ethan realized the lesson was not only about Amelia. It was about the kind of future he wanted to create. Meanwhile, Amelia spent more time with the three princes. She never treated them as symbols of the crown. To her, they were still the same young wolves she had found beneath the pine tree. She cared about their happiness, their fears, and their hopes. The princes trusted her completely because she had cared for them before knowing their true identity. Ethan saw that trust and understood something important. The kingdom did not need someone who simply wanted to stand near the throne. It needed someone who reminded everyone what the throne was meant to protect. But as Amelia's bond with the royal family became stronger, a new question began spreading throughout Frostvale. If the Omega who saved the princes had already changed the kingdom, what role would she have in its future? And soon, Ethan would have to decide whether he was ready to challenge centuries of tradition for the person who had already changed his heart. The days that followed brought a quiet but noticeable change throughout Frostvale Kingdom. Amelia Carter did not suddenly become someone different because she lived inside the palace. She did not seek attention, and she did not try to prove that she deserved a place among the royal family. Instead, she continued doing the same things she had always done. She listened to people. She offered help when someone needed it. She treated every person with the same kindness, whether they carried a royal title or lived in a small village far from the palace walls. Ethan Blackwood noticed this more than anyone. He had spent his entire life surrounded by people who carefully chose their words because they wanted something from the crown. But Amelia never changed the way she spoke to him. She spoke to the Alpha King the same way she spoke to the lonely villagers she had known all her life. One morning, Ethan invited Amelia to join him during a visit to several communities near Frostvale. He wanted her to see the kingdom beyond the palace and understand the people she had unknowingly inspired. Amelia was nervous at first. "I do not know if people want to hear from me," she admitted as they traveled along the snowy roads. Ethan looked at her with a calm expression. "You keep thinking people need a reason to value you. They do not. They only need the chance to know you." When they arrived, many villagers gathered to welcome the Alpha King. But their attention quickly shifted toward Amelia. Some recognized her from the stories about the lost princes. Others had heard about the Omega who cared for 3 royal heirs before knowing who they were. Amelia expected questions. She expected doubt. Instead, she saw something she had rarely experienced before. Acceptance. An elderly villager approached her and smiled. "You reminded us that kindness still matters. Sometimes people forget how powerful a simple act of care can be." Amelia felt a quiet emotion rise within her. She had spent so many years believing her kindness was unnoticed. Now she realized that even small choices could create changes she would never see. Later that evening, Ethan and Amelia walked through the palace gardens. The 3 young princes rested nearby, enjoying the peaceful night. "You changed the way this kingdom sees strength," Ethan said. Amelia looked surprised. "I did not change anything. I only helped when someone needed me." Ethan smiled. "That is exactly why you changed everything." Amelia looked toward the palace lights in the distance. "I used to think being strong meant proving everyone wrong. Showing them they were mistaken about me." She paused for a moment. "But now I think strength is simply refusing to become cruel because others were cruel first." Ethan listened carefully. Those words stayed with him because they represented everything he admired about her. She had every reason to hold on to resentment, yet she chose understanding. She had every reason to seek recognition, yet she chose compassion. As their connection grew stronger, the royal court began noticing something they could no longer ignore. Amelia was not a temporary guest in Frostvale. She had become someone the people trusted. Someone who understood the struggles of those without power. Someone who reminded the kingdom that leadership was not only about commanding others. It was about caring for them. But with growing respect came a new challenge. The traditions of Frostvale had always been clear about who could stand beside the Alpha King. Many believed the future of the kingdom depended on following those traditions without question. Ethan knew a decision was approaching. A decision that would not only affect Amelia and himself, but would reveal what kind of king he truly wanted to become. The days leading toward the royal announcement became some of the most important days in Frostvale Kingdom. Everyone could feel that a decision was approaching, even though the Alpha King had not shared his thoughts publicly. The palace halls were filled with quiet conversations about tradition, responsibility, and the future of the crown. Many people admired Amelia Carter, but others still struggled to accept that an Omega from Silvermoon territory had become someone so close to the royal family. Amelia noticed every look and every whisper, but this time, she did not allow them to define her. She had spent too many years believing other people's opinions were the truth. Now she understood something different. The truth was found in the choices a person made when nobody was watching. One afternoon, Amelia visited the royal library while researching the history of Frostvale. She wanted to understand the kingdom she had unexpectedly become part of. Among the old records, she discovered stories of past leaders who had changed traditions when those traditions no longer served the people. The discovery surprised her. She had always believed that the palace represented rules that could never change. But now she saw that even the strongest kingdoms evolved because someone had the courage to question what had always been accepted. Ethan found her reading near the large windows overlooking the gardens. "You always search for answers before making decisions," he said. Amelia smiled. "Is that a bad thing?" "No," Ethan replied. "It is one of the reasons I trust you." His answer made her pause. Trust was not something Amelia had received easily in her life. For years, she had been treated as someone whose words did not matter. Hearing the Alpha King say he trusted her felt almost impossible to believe. "Ethan," she said quietly, "what happens if the kingdom never accepts me?" He looked at her with certainty. "Then we continue showing them why they should." Amelia looked away. "I do not want you to choose me because you feel responsible for what happened." Ethan's expression softened. "You still do not understand, do you?" She looked back at him. "Understand what?" "I do not value you because you saved the princes. I value you because of who you were before anyone knew you had saved them." His words reached deeper than she expected. For the first time, Amelia realized that Ethan had seen the person behind the reputation others had created for her. He had seen her kindness before the kingdom knew her name. Meanwhile, the three young princes continued growing stronger under Amelia's care. They followed her through the palace gardens, rested near her during quiet afternoons, and trusted her completely. The royal staff began noticing something special. The princes were happiest when Amelia was nearby, not because she treated them like future rulers, but because she treated them like children who deserved warmth and understanding. This became the final proof many people needed. Amelia was not seeking a place beside the royal family. She had already earned it through her actions. As the day of the royal gathering approached, Ethan prepared to speak before the entire kingdom. He knew his decision would be remembered for generations. He knew some people would question him. But he also knew that a true leader could not protect old traditions at the cost of ignoring what was right. On the evening before the announcement, Ethan and Amelia stood together beneath the palace stars. "Are you afraid?" he asked. Amelia thought about the journey that brought her there. "A little," she admitted. "But I am not the same person who walked into that forest alone." Ethan smiled. "No. You are the person who walked into that forest with nothing to gain and changed everything." The next morning, the kingdom would hear his decision. And everyone would discover whether the Alpha King would follow the expectations of the past or choose the future he truly believed in. The grand hall of Frostvale Palace had never been filled with such anticipation. From every corner of the kingdom, representatives had gathered to hear the Alpha King's announcement. The golden banners hanging above the hall represented generations of tradition, but on this day, everyone understood that something new was about to begin. Amelia Carter stood quietly beside Ethan Blackwood, feeling the weight of every eye upon her. Years ago, she had stood alone in a small village, believing that no one would ever truly see her. Now she stood in the heart of the kingdom, not because of a title or a family name, but because of a choice she made when nobody was watching. Ethan stepped forward as the hall became silent. For generations, Frostvale has believed that strength comes from power, influence, and tradition, he began. But I have learned that true strength is revealed through compassion, responsibility, and the courage to care for others. Many listened carefully, knowing these words carried deeper meaning. Ethan continued. The three heirs of Frostvale returned to us because someone chose kindness before knowing their identity. Someone protected them without expecting recognition. Someone offered them warmth when the world had forgotten them. His gaze moved toward Amelia. That person was Amelia Carter. The hall remained quiet. Amelia lowered her eyes, uncomfortable with so much attention. She had never wanted praise. She had never helped the princes because she wanted a place near the throne. Ethan understood that. Amelia did not save the future of this kingdom because she wanted power. She saved it because kindness was simply who she was. A quiet emotion moved through the crowd. Many people remembered how they once judged her without knowing her. They remembered how easily they had believed she was unimportant. Ethan looked across the hall. Today, I ask this kingdom to recognize something we should have understood long ago. A person's value is not determined by where they come from. It is revealed through the choices they make. Then he turned toward Amelia and extended his hand. Stand beside me, not because the crown requires it, but because this kingdom is stronger when people like you have a voice. Amelia looked at him, surprised. She had expected a royal announcement. She had expected a formal decision. She never expected to hear that her greatest strength was the very thing others once considered a weakness. Slowly, she accepted his hand. The moment was not about status. It was about recognition. It was about a king choosing to honor someone who had never stopped being kind, even when kindness brought her no reward. After the gathering ended, Amelia walked through the palace gardens with Ethan. The three young princes followed happily nearby, enjoying the peaceful afternoon. Are you certain about this? Amelia asked softly. Ethan smiled. About what? About choosing a future that may be difficult. Ethan looked toward the kingdom beyond the palace walls. A difficult choice is not always the wrong choice. Sometimes it is the one that matters most. Amelia smiled. I never imagined my life would become this. Ethan looked at her. Neither did I. But sometimes the people who change our lives are the ones we never expected to find. As the sun began to set over Frostvale, the kingdom slowly began accepting a new truth. The Omega they once overlooked had become the person who reminded them what leadership truly meant. But the greatest change was not happening inside the palace. It was happening in the hearts of the people who finally learned to see beyond appearances. Years passed after the day that changed Frostvale Kingdom forever, but the memory of that moment remained alive in the hearts of its people. The story of Amelia Carter was no longer told as the tale of an Omega who had been overlooked. It became the story of a woman who proved that kindness could reach places that power never could. The kingdom continued to grow, not because it abandoned its traditions, but because it learned when traditions needed to change. Amelia never forgot the small cottage at the edge of Silvermoon territory. Even after becoming an important figure in Frostvale, she often returned to the villages that shaped her. She visited families, listened to their concerns, and reminded everyone that every voice mattered. The people who once looked past her now welcomed her with respect. Children who heard her story no longer saw an Omega who had been rejected. They saw someone who showed them that difficult beginnings did not decide the ending of a person's journey. Ethan Blackwood continued to lead Frostvale with the same determination that had always guided him, but his leadership had changed. He no longer believed a king needed to stand above everyone else. He believed a true leader needed to understand the people standing below the crown. And whenever important decisions were made, Amelia was beside him. Not because she needed the protection of the throne. Not because she had become part of the royal family through the three princes she saved. She stood beside him because her wisdom, compassion, and courage had already earned that place long before anyone recognized it. The three lost heirs grew stronger each year, and they never forgot the person who cared for them when they were simply three frightened pups in the forest. They often visited Amelia's garden, where flowers grew beside the palace walls. To them, she was not a symbol or a legend. She was the person who gave them warmth when they had nothing else. One evening, many years after their first meeting, Ethan and Amelia walked through the same garden where they had once spoken about uncertain futures. The kingdom lights shined in the distance, and the peaceful sound of life surrounded them. "Do you ever think about that day in the forest?" Ethan asked. Amelia smiled. "Every day." "If you had known who they were, would you have done anything differently?" She looked toward the garden path where the young princes used to play. After a moment, she answered, "No." Because they needed help before they became important. They mattered because they were alive, not because of their name. Ethan smiled because that was the answer he had expected. It was the reason he trusted her. It was the reason their journey had changed him forever. "The world judged you before it knew you," Ethan said quietly. "But you never allowed the world to decide who you were." Amelia looked toward the kingdom beyond the palace walls. "Maybe everyone deserves the chance to be seen clearly before they are judged." Those words became the lesson Frostvale carried for generations. The kingdom remembered that strength was not measured by titles, wealth, or influence. It was measured by the choices people made when nobody was watching. Amelia Carter was once the Omega everyone ignored. Then she became the person who saved a royal family without knowing their name. But the greatest part of her story was not that she changed the future of Frostvale. It was that she remained the same kind-hearted person who chose compassion even when the world had given her every reason not to. And beside her stood the Alpha King who discovered that the greatest treasures are not found through power or status. They are found when someone sees the heart of another person and chooses to stand beside it forever.